Segmentation over personalisation. Interesting one.
Well, I thought it'd be a good one because I think we, I think in its core, actually agree with each other, but we're both coming from different angles. I think our natural position on this is to disagree, and we've sort of found a happy medium. I think that we can both get behind is
To be
probably.
honest, I've come round a little bit after watching what Henry can do. Um, it's kind of obvious once you like stare at it for a while. It is kind of obvious, and the personalisation is getting a little bit, well, I think it has been for a while, hasn't it? Hi, first name, looks like you're doing some great things at insert company name. Noticed your post about, it intrigued me. Curious to find out. Yeah. So
Yeah.
when I think a little bit of personalization's fine, getting the first name in there, but I
I mean,
think,
that's a no-brainer.
yeah, some people still send out mass outreach with no personalization at all. Be surprised.
The last thing I would want anyone to take from this is that I think personalization is a bad idea. Personalization, it is the whole game when it comes to selling something to someone, high value business service, just is the space we live in. The more personalized the experience of engaging with your brand, the more effective it's going to be. That's why I know that every single video that you send to one of our own prospects, you look at them, you research them, you think about their business, and you record a video. And I know you'll often comment on their posts, and that is personalization. That's useful personalization, and works. It works really well. I've got absolutely no debate with that. My simple position on it is that bad personalization, and that's the example that you gave, hi, first name, fine, comfortable so far. See you doing
Yeah, we've done it.
cool. And like, just really curious about your blog post title. I find that kind of really fake. I find that really fake level of personalization is for a lot of people. I'm not going to say it's for everyone, but for a lot of people, it's a massive turnoff because you can see it a mile off. And my only argument is if you're in a choice between really thin, low value, fake personalization and no personalization, choose no personalization. If you've got the resource and the bandwidth to go deep and approach every prospect in a genuinely, and that's the magic word there, in a genuinely personalized, uniquely valuable way, then that is always going to do better than automation. I would
100%.
get behind that.
Yeah.
Despite the fact we do automation, we do automation because not everyone is sitting on an indefinite time resource. And actually, I've always felt, do something to allow your prospects to give you a hand raise, to show you that out of 100 people, these are the 3 or the 5 who are vaguely interested in talking to you, and then personalize down to the nth degree.
To be honest, so why it's just had its day, hasn't it? When it first came out and you had the ability for something to go and scrape and have a look and and parse data, it was quite fresh and new, wasn't it? So it was quite clever. So it's just run its course. So now it's just so obvious because everybody's doing it that it's not clever anymore, and it's obvious that you haven't read my post. I've actually, funnily enough, I did a raft of video intros yesterday. And they are time consuming. And I've actually changed my little script now to, I used to say, I've had a look through your profile. Looks like you're doing some cool stuff. And I have had a look through the profile. But it's getting so busy because we're so good at lead gen. little pitch there. On a serious note, because I've got so many to do now, it's the trade-off. I now say, I'll be honest, I haven't had time to look at your profile, but I'd like to take the opportunity to learn a little bit more about you on a call. I'll learn a little bit more about you and share with what I do to help founder-led recruitment agencies. So I'm still being personal. I'm still doing my video intro and it's genuine, but I genuinely haven't had time to look through the profile because it's that trade-off against scale. I want to get the video done. I want them to see me, but then it's like you say, well, don't personalize at all, or don't try if you haven't got time. And that leads into the segmenting piece, doesn't it? It's better to get a message across to a specific person with a very relevant piece of information than it is to just try your best to be, hi, Bob, looks like you're doing some amazing stuff on your ski holiday and
Yeah.
all that. So yeah, it's
That's it. Yeah.
genuinely have got so many leads now that it's difficult to do. Honestly, I was gonna talk to you about it actually. Seriously, it's bonkers. They're coming. I like to tick off lists. I like that little bit of euphoria when you've finished a list.
Job.
So
Yeah.
because of the way we work in Trello, I'm just dragging the card across. Video done. Video done. Video done. And every time I'm getting to the top, there's another one flipping landed in there. And yesterday I got the ump with it. I was like, oh my god, I don't know what's going on, but Henry's working some magic at the moment. But yeah.
Well,
So my picture's changed because I haven't got a chance to look at the flipping profiles.
yeah. Well, look, I mean, the magic he's working, let's be transparent. He has built some incredibly clever stuff back there. But the magic he's working is segmentation. So like, let's take our hat off and put our recruiter hats on.
Yeah.
When you start sending outreach, when you start targeting an incredibly broad, let's just go construction industry. So you might narrow down a little bit and say, well, look, contractors. We're gonna look at contractors, but that's an incredibly broad range. Even then, if you're narrowing down to say contractors in the construction industry, they vary so much. So if you want to send a message to a group that broad, it has to be deeply, deeply generic. And all of the people who are hammering personalization value are completely right. If you send something utterly generic to, 2,000 UK-based construction contractors, main contractors, MEP, tier 2, the whole range across dozens of different job titles, you send something really vague, it adds no value, no one gives a shit, it never gets looked at. So sold on that. You need to do something better than that. Totally sold on the idea that if you get into one individual decision maker at one individual contractor and really get to understand their business and take the time to come to them with something utterly unique and bespoke to them, completely accept that is the single best sales approach that you're going to be able to make, but you're going to really limit the number of sales approaches you can make. So our position generally sits somewhere in the middle of those two. We don't want generic crap. We're not going to work with founders and say to them, listen, let's put an extra 10 hours in the day so you can do this. We're finding something that solves a problem. And for me, that is always never about fake personalization, always about deep, deep segmentation. So I'm going to keep running with this construction industry example. If you start to say, well, look, actually, we're not going to look at all contractors here because there are so many different types. We're going to go specifically into MEP, and we're going to be really focused. We're not going to talk about MEP design. We're going to talk only about the actual contractors, the lads who turn up and do stuff. I always show my knowledge of construction trades, but I do stuff with hammers and spanners and stuff. So they're the lads we want to talk to. And that's still a really broad group. So, you're already more focused, so you can give them more value because, they're likely doing relatively similar things in a way. But let's go more. So, some of these businesses run almost entirely on subbies. So there might be sort of 10 kind of permanent staff, including the managing director. Some of them are vast and are actually subsidiaries of main contractors. And, there's hundreds upon hundreds of people. Some of them, decisions are being made in a kind of project manager, project director type level. Some of them, as we said, it's literally the guy who owns the business. Some of them have talent acquisition, some of them don't. Now, if you went to all of them with a broad message, it's going to land on very different kind of, it's going to land on very different ears. But if you say, look, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to look at all of the MEP contractors. We're going to focus them down to a single discipline. So, they do lots of different things, MEP contractors. We're going to look at ones that do commercial fit out. So they're going to show up and they're going to do an office building. They're going to do a shop. They're going to do a hotel, those sorts of things. That's the only thing they do. And we're going to look at them in this area. So we might do like the home counties. And we're going to look at all of the ones that have 20 to 50 staff. So these are not tiny, but not the big ones. And we're only going to look at ones that don't have talent acquisition. And at that point, you can start to give a very kind of tailored piece of outreach. So, there are a relatively small number of people in that list. They all likely have very, very similar requirements. So you might target a couple of different decision makers in those organizations. So there might be, look, here's message one, which is for the owners, managing directors of those sorts of firms. Here's message two, that's for project directors in those firms. And you're now starting to speak to people who have very, very similar needs. So you can put real time and effort into writing one message that all of them get that actually has some genuine value to them. So it's that segmentation that allows you to give them something good. I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent, which I know I like to do. Commenting on LinkedIn posts. I do it. I think it's a really useful way of sort of getting in front of someone, starting to build a relationship, learning more about, if you do it right, learning more about the industry that you play in, because actually you're genuinely reading a post, taking some interest in it and adding some value. I've never, to the best of my knowledge, given a thumbs up, congratulations, kind of like, oh, really interesting idea type comment. I've always, if I'm going to comment on something that someone said, I've read it, I've absorbed it. And the reason I'm commenting is not just to be in their feed, it's because I have something to add to that discussion.
Mm.
And that's great when you have that. But with good segmentation, you can kind of produce something with that level of thought that really top quality personalization has, but it's relevant to a decent range of people, if that makes sense. And one of the things that we really love is to actually go in quite early on with a candidate editorial. We've so many times working with so many different recruiters, they've come to the marketing team and say, oh yeah, no, that sounds like a great idea. But for my business, my completely uniquely special recruitment agency, actually that's not the right approach for me. And we will normally, because lecturing people and telling them they're wrong isn't a particularly effective strategy, we'll normally say, well, look, let's do an A/B test. If you're comfortable with it, with us doing this, let's do what we want to do to a small group of people. We'll send a candidate editorial, something where we talk about a specific candidate that we think might be interesting to your organization, and here are some interesting. So it's not the CV. It's like, here are some interesting things about them. We'll do that, and then we'll do your version, and we'll put them next to each other. And surprise, surprise, every single time we've ever run that experiment, always the candidate editorial does better, because that's the thing that people want to hear from recruiters. They want to hear about a problem you can solve for them right now, not why you're great. So yeah, we find going in with a candidate editorial is really effective. And coming back to my experience on the other side of a recruitment transaction, running a business and getting outreach constantly from recruiters, my biggest bugbear was when people would come to me with a CV, a whole CV, they just chop the name, chop the phone number, chop the email address off, and everything else was exactly the same. They expected me to do all of the work of looking at this to work out if this was someone that I'd actually be interested in employing. And 9.5 times out of 10, they'd sent me someone that the most cursory research would have told them I would never in a million years employ. My favorite example, and it's because I had this so often. My favorite example is running a digital agency where we recruited designers, we recruited digital marketing people, we recruited people who did kind of PPC, paid social, and we recruited developers, front end and back end. They would send me like a Microsoft help desk person.
Mm.
And 2 seconds on the website would tell you this brilliant Microsoft help desk person isn't going to ever come and work at my agency, because we
Yeah.
don't do that at all.
There's no thought gone into that at all, has there?
Exactly. But the concept behind it was always great. The concept behind it of like, you have got a need, you need some people. I have got those people. I understand what a good person looks like for your organization. And I'm going to signal two things. I have the people that you need, and I understand what good looks like. That is fantastic if you've segmented properly, because you're genuinely showing, I do know what good looks like. I do have access to the candidates that you need. And also, one of the key things for us, we've never, ever, ever sent a CV on behalf of one of our partners. We have gone to the effort of going through that CV and explaining to you why you might want to read it, and you might want to ask us for some more information about this person, because we don't send a CV, we send a story. What is it about this person that made me think of you? And you could do that on a one-to-one level, but actually, if you've got a tight enough segment, that specific, I don't know, like BIM coordinator who has got quite a lot of experience specifically on commercial fit outs, so understands the space.
A lot of acronyms floating around here for our audience's benefit. What's a BIM and what's an MEP?
Okay, so mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. I can't stress enough. This is not my expertise.
Right.
I've just picked it because I think it's quite a straightforward example.
And a BIM?
I think it's
What's a
mechanical.
BIM? What's a bin man? I thought he comes around and gets you rubbish.
No, building information management.
Oh, BIM.
Yeah. So
Right.
they use software to they do something with software and buildings. But the key thing that I do know, and this is the important part, is I know that MEP contractors recruit these guys. And I know that working with a partner in that space, that we can identify specific candidates that are likely to be a really interesting fit for an MEP contractor. We can go even deeper than that and say, actually, if that MEP contractor is working in this subset of the industry, this person has decent experience with that. And then when we send them a story saying, look, let me introduce this candidate, I'm doing this off the top of my head, it's not how we write it. Let me introduce this candidate. Here's something interesting about their career. Here's something interesting about their career. Here's something interesting about career. So here are 3 interesting things about work that they've previously done, which made me think that actually they might be a good fit for you if you need any support at the moment. Would you like to know more about them? And most people go, no, thank you, we're not recruiting at the minute. But that's absolutely fine, because what we're doing is we're opening a dialogue, and we get a lot of responses, and people would think that no thank you is a bad response, but it's not. They're saying, actually, I'm going to bother responding to you because I find this outreach somewhat refreshing. So I'm going to tell you I'm not recruiting at the moment, or actually quite often I'm not recruiting at the moment. I don't think we're going to have anything for the next couple of months, but we have this project. With the amount of forecasting of when I might need someone like this that we see when you do the right piece of outreach is astonishing,
Yeah. Just
because drill
pausing
right.
on the segmenting bit for a minute, and we'll come back around to how we manage responses, because that's quite important. It leads into perhaps another discussion, but what you do with responses and the follow-ups. But just pausing on the segmentation bit. So I'm playing the role of a recruiter now. Oh, I use Apollo, and I've got LinkedIn Sales Nav. I can segment to that level. So what's the secret sauce then? Because I can do my own segmentation. We're using Apollo and LinkedIn Navigator. So what do you think the bit our secret sauce is with that Henry pulls out the bag?
Okay, so our secret sauce is some
Hate
proprietary
secret sauce,
software.
by the way.
Oh,
Don't know why I said that.
I like secret. I like nice marinara, and I'm not telling you the recipe. Yeah, so look, our edge when it comes to this is something that Henry's built, that does all of the hard work for us. But let's be entirely transparent. Absolutely, yes. If you want to spend the time doing it, you absolutely can manually segment to the sort of level that we would. My suspicion is you will find a smaller list than we would, because of the way that our system works. But the last thing I would want anyone to take from this is if you look at it and say, well, look, yeah, I agree, I'd like to segment more, but you seem like a pair of bellends, so I'm not going to work with you. What am I going to do? Yeah, absolutely, you can do this yourself. You're thinking about. Let's think about a few areas you might do it. You might want to think about kind of organization size. Bigger organizations, smaller organizations, the approach is likely to be different. Job titles is a massive one. The more niche you are in your sector, the better the outreach that you're likely to do. So rather than going right, let's look at everyone who. Let's think of another example, so you don't ask me what a BIM is.
I know what a BIM is. It was for the
No,
audience.
no. I'm just let's think about a different. Well, no, let's keep with the example. So, people who come in and change buildings. Some of them come in and they put in aircon. Some of them come in and they wire it. Some of them come in and they do the sort of finishing, all shiny, sexy type stuff. They employ different people. They do different things. If you look at the SIC code, it's quite possible that it will look the same. So you break them down by what they do, how big they are, who you're talking to within the organization. Another big one for recruiters is, do they have talent acquisition people in-house, or do they not? You'll again probably want to take I'm not suggesting that you have to go through TA, but you'll probably want to take a slightly different approach. So these are all things that you absolutely can figure out yourself. Now, I think we've probably covered this before. I don't come from a recruitment background. I've been in recruitment for 6, 7 years now. But my background is digital marketing, and more of my work in my original agency, which I sold, more of my work was B2C. So, I was working in those sort of mass campaigns where, you know, it's very hard to segment without tools. So, rather than, a recruiter sitting down and spending 2 or 3 days work to really nail down multiple lists, and then obviously you have to keep track of the multiple lists, we'd be looking at, 2, 3 million people that we wanted to talk to, and that's bloody hard to do without software. But long story short, yes, absolutely, you can do this. If you wanted me, Steve, to explain why we think we do it better, the best example I can give you is actually Meta's ad tool. So if you've ever done a Facebook and Instagram advert, you'll know that you can go in, and there are quite a lot of different sort of criteria that you can that you can segment a list based on. They're reducing actually. Two reasons. One is that Meta kind of wants you to use their own their own AI tools, which you should. They're actually better. They'll do it better than you will. So they want you to do that, but also they got a spanking after a few rigged elections, essentially, where they start going, no, you can't let people segment on this. You can't find people who are in horrible
Yeah,
debt off
Romania
of the
copped it, didn't
scary
they, from the
list.
Russians?
Yeah, no, like it was there was a big scandal. We had some of it here as well. There was a lot of stuff went on over the course of a year or two, and people were like, no, most of the world's kind of population has given vast amounts of data to Meta, and now they're being sold to in a way that's verging on predatory. They still are, by the way. It's just now you're not allowed to use that. You're not allowed to use those specific filters. But rather than rabbiting on, the most effective thing, and this was some time ago, so no doubt it's gone further. The most effective thing that you would do with a Meta ad, so Facebook, Instagram, whichever one, was their lookalike audience. So, rather than you going, right, okay, I think I want to sell to men, they should be between 35 and 45, they should be, relatively high kind of demographic, and it would be good if they liked BMWs, Mercedes, or Audis, and, they're my sort of people, they're going to buy this watch or whatever you're trying to sell. What you would do is you would take a customer list of your best customers, the people that you want to sell to. You would show that to Meta. They would find the ones that they could find within their network, and they would profile them on a huge number of factors that you had never even thought of. And they would go and find a much bigger pool of people who,
Mm.
in their view, look like that.
Yeah. Apollo's got that tool now, the lookalike tool. Yeah.
So what we've built is something similar to that, essentially. So we feed our system, and we make this nice and easy. We talk to we talk to our customers, our clients, our partners, and we get a bit of an understanding of who they are most effective working for. So it's a mixture of some real people, some real examples, and then just sort of general trends that are useful. And then we basically take that intel and start to build kind of bigger target markets. We look for known good accounts. We look for exclusions, which are really powerful as well. So, we get them to tell us who they don't like to work with and what it is about those ones that makes them different to the ones that we talked about. And we take that data, and essentially we run a kind of multi-level agentic tool, which goes out. It basically plugs into most of the data sources that you might have come across as a recruiter. We plug by API into most of them to draw different data. We also do quite a lot of web-based research. So some of the agents will go in and sort of go through their website, gather news information about them. And we start to build a really, really big picture of what good looks like for you. And then we go out and find that list. So we find that we get pretty big lists that way, but deeply segmented and similar lists. So whenever we've sort of manually using Sales Navigator, which is a good tool. Whenever we've manually used things like Sales Navigator to kind of compete against our own system to see how we do, we can also, with enough time and effort, make pretty segmented lists. But generally speaking, if the system's found 20, we found more like 10. So it kind of makes the volume a little bit easier, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we don't see any drop in quality. You know, it's either the same or better as the list that we build, and it's a bigger one than the list we build.
These tools are a time magpie as well, aren't they, for recruiters? I've been there myself. You know, quite handy in Apollo and Full and Rich. And the problem is, it's it can get quite expensive, and it's the time magpie where you could be doing something else. And often, if you don't really know what you're doing in there, it's okay just whacking a few filters on in there. And then you'll seed test the list, and you see the first couple of pages are really relevant. A lot of people don't know that it's listed by relevance as well. So like the quality of the lead deteriorates as you run down the list
Yeah.
often in some of those tools. And it's just that
That's
it's
not
that
the
thing,
big
isn't it?
factor.
It's just
We
another thing that you've got to do where you could be doing something else. And
yeah.
and it's like having a go at plastering, isn't it? You can put plaster on the wall, but it's gonna look shit. So that's it, because it's a skill, isn't it? It's an art form. It's it's a developing your talents over the years to be able to do it. And why would you do it yourself if somebody can do it for you better?
Yeah.
I wrestled with that when I was younger.
What's that say?
I wrestled with that when I was younger. Just
Yeah.
that's how I ended up having lots of experiences, so many different things. I just refused. Sometimes it was years ago, it was very expensive to get things done, so I often had to go myself.
Mhm.
Tried and failed in a few places, but then, became quite proficient in some of it as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, they are quite expensive tools. They add up over time as well. You often find that you can get your list, and then it costs you a few quid to export it, and then or then you in for Apollo, for example, you've got tools inside there that can do your outreach for you,
Yeah.
manual steps, but then it's just configuring it and the time it takes and the knowledge it takes to get it right. And I've been here. This is, I'd be surprised if anyone's any different to this. There'll be some outliers where it's worked, but you set off this fancy campaign and you're sort of doing like a little rain dance to see if it works. And then all of a
Mm.
sudden you get, you might get a few leads from it, and then off you go to deliver, and like you turn it off. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
oh shit, and I've got a few leads from it, or you get none at all, and you're like, that was crap, that didn't work. I've heard all this before. It doesn't work for me. And then you're just talking yourself into a corner where you're never going to be able to scale, because if you don't release some of the duties or some of the journey, whether it's client acquisition or candidate, you've got no chance of just cloning yourself. I mean, it's just one of them.
Yeah. Look, I mean, look, it's about making decisions. I would never say to a recruiter, don't spend the time and effort to understand your marketing. Don't go and explore a tool like Apollo or I'm not going to do too much name dropping, but I wouldn't say don't do it. If you want to do it, fair enough, do it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You've got to think about where you're going to spend your time most effectively. And this is in marketing. This is an argument that you get a lot. People will say to you, "Well, couldn't I do that?" Well, yeah, I could do what you do. I'm not a stupid bloke. You run a business doing X, Y, Z. I could probably learn that, but I already am pretty good at marketing, and I've already learned that. And you're already really good at your thing, and you've already learned that. So maybe we will produce more together than than we would with me trying to learn what you do, or you trying to learn what I. It's so yeah. Look, I would never say don't do it if it's something you've got a real passion for, you want to understand it. Then yeah, what is I think upsetting is like you see people who could benefit so much from some of the technology that's out there, and they get into something like Apollo, they give it a test drive, it looks quite promising, and then it's ends up a big mess, and the conclusion is, all right, this doesn't work, throw it away. And I think that's a bit of a shame. It's like I'm thinking about kind of 1980s supercars, that like celebrities were constantly getting fished out of ditches because they really took some driving. They weren't crap cars. It's just the people who were getting in them didn't have the capability.
Lamborghini Countach from Cannonball Run.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolute murder those things were. I've driven one of
Yeah.
those.
Have you? How far?
Horrendous. It's horrendous. Yeah, it was like on my poster car when I was growing up. Cannonball Run, the white Lamborghini.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've seen it, but yeah, I got the chance to drive one, and I could barely steer it. It was bonkers.
Yeah, no, I've never been in one, but yeah, there's quite a few of those cars that were just lethal, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just like, you know, even modern. We've talked about this before. You know, if I went and sat in Lando Norris's car, I wouldn't even be able to get it started. I'd stall it the instant I touched it. But look, he does some really quite remarkable stuff with it. But again, this is not to tell people, listen, you have to work with us. What you should take from this is absolutely you really should segment deeply. You know, form your own conclusions on this, but people are very wise to very thin AI driven personalization. And you might be better to give very deep thought to a one to many message that goes to a clear segment ahead of no thought whatsoever to a shit message that sounds like it's personal, but you know, to everyone isn't. They would be useful things. Absolutely. If you want to dive into tools like Apollo and get good at them, great. But, you know, if you've been in there, found it expensive, didn't get great outcomes, please don't sort of sit there and
Dismiss
think, well,
it.
look, AI, automation, personalization, all of these things are a total waste of time. You know, it's probably that you've not got into it deeply enough. Because these are things that work, you know, and in terms of our approach, where we tend to talk about candidates early rather than recruiters, because employers are generally interested in candidates and not interested in recruiters. Those sorts of things become deeply powerful because you start to talk to people in their own language, and they respond very well to that. You know, if as a digital agency owner, and oh Christ,
Did you
insect.
see that?
I didn't. I saw your reaction to it though. What was it?
That flipping the thing that was trying to kill me the other day, still here.
Well, that bee or wasp or something.
Yeah, it's
What were
massive.
you laughing at? That's a fucking bat coming at your head.
No, I tell you how big it is. It's
Yeah.
activating my microphone, so the software that we're recording on thinks that I'm speaking.
It's actually some angry
It
steroid
is
for
honestly, it's massive. Should we spend a couple of minutes just talking about, which can lead us into the next video, I think. We'll just touch on it, how we deal with responses. Because obviously we want to get our JVs in front of people at the right time. But often we experience a reply of, which is positive, we're not hiring at the moment, we've got a PSL, or thanks very much, not interested at the moment. So if we spend a couple of minutes just talking about how we deal with that, because I think that's quite. Oh, sorry. Honestly, I'm not bothered about little wasps.
Actually, to be fair,
This thing is
all right.
this is the big boss at the end of the level wasp.
To be honest, that's probably quite a good topic because that sort of ties very deeply into the issue with deep kind of micro segments, because you create a vast amount of data to keep track of, and if you're trying to do that in spreadsheets, you know, you've got and instead of a list of 1,000, you've got, you know, 100 lists of 10, you know, or 200 lists that vary from 5 to 20, you know, and it's a hell of a job to keep track of. So, you know, we haven't built a tool that we want to sell, if that makes sense. You know, 90% of the cost of software, sorry, I should stress this as a stat I've made up. It might be slightly different, but you know, the point I'm trying to get across is a vast amount of the cost of software that you use is not on the sort of core deep functionality. The vast majority of it is actually about the user interface, because hard though they are, they're trying to make them easier and easier to actually use. So we kind of made a conscious decision when it came to building these tools. Like, you know, do we want to launch a SaaS and go through all of that sort of bullshit, to be honest, that you see in that industry? And we were like, no, actually what we want to do is, and this is kind of very much, I think, our mentality for the three of us on AI. It's like, we want to do stuff where we can use software to superpower our people. So, you know, you work with people when you work with us. You don't work with an AI system. You don't work in a self-serve SaaS. You work with people, but those people are deeply tech-enabled. And actually, a lot of the work we do is to try and help our partners, those recruiters, become deeply tech-enabled using our tech-enabled people. It's all a little bit kind of... it's a little bit Terminator 2, isn't it? But yeah, so I'm rambling here, but what I'm getting at is, because we didn't try and build a SaaS, we can be kind of, we can be quite niche about what we do. So a lot of what our system does, I was talking before about how it prospects, how it segments, but a lot of what our system does is essentially just to kind of track data. So we make it really easy to manage those buckets. You don't have to think about those buckets; they kind of manage themselves, and it's largely the kind of same mentality in terms of how we handle those responses. So I don't know if you want me to talk a little bit about the technology, or if you want me to talk a little bit about kind of the actual.
Well, no, I was just conscious of time. Obviously, it'll lead quite well into possibly the next video. But one of the things, this will scare some people to death. So, like a PG warning. Some of the ways that we've been trialing about how the system can reply based on what comes back when Henry built that tool where the agent's reading the reply and then making a decision on which response to go, because often you don't want to ignore no thank you at the moment, our PSL's up for review in 6 months. As a recruiter, that's something you deal with. Okay, how do we get onto the PSL? But that's work that you've got to be doing. And often, if it's really busy, you'll just forget about something like that. But that could be a nice opportunity.
Well, from a human point of view, let's sort of forget the system side of it. Although I do want to come back to that because it isn't actually replying to people. It absolutely
No,
could.
no, I
What I'm-
know. And like I said,
I,
caveated with it doesn't at the moment, but it's how it.
to be clear, the only reason it doesn't is because there's a conscious decision not to turn on auto
Yeah.
reply. It absolutely today could do it. What it does is it sends our recruiter partner. We think that this is probably the best way to handle it, and they have a yeah or no. So there's an editable response prepared. It simplifies things for the recruiter. It would be interesting to actually get a stat about how many of them get edited and how many of them it's just a click yes. But yeah, it's so we're not automating the responses because we can't. We're not automating the responses because
We don't
we
want to.
choose
Yeah.
not to at
Yeah.
present.
Yeah. It's
That
clever though. What it's building is in terms of when it's building those responses is really cool.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think what's fun is like, I don't think we've talked to one of our partners who hasn't been, oh yeah, no, I wouldn't want my responses written for me. I'm going to do them myself. And we're like, yeah, like, listen, it's going to do it. It's not going to send it, use it if you find it useful, throw it away if you don't, and tell us if you want to stop getting them. Not one of them has said, stop sending me the responses. Actually, the response is mostly, this is fucking eerie how much this sounds like me and how much it's exactly what I would have liked to have said. That's a big part of our interview process. The work that we do in this, look, the analysis might be technology, but the work is deeply human, where we get to know our partners, we get to understand them, we get to understand their industries. We spend a lot of time talking to them because we want to know how they talk. I mean, we like them as well. We only really work with people we like, but like a lot of it is, it's the reason that we don't like to do things in 3D. It's not because we're too lazy to go and meet with people. It's because actually, if you do things on video calls like we are here, you can get transcripts, you understand how they talk, how they think, how they speak, and you start to gather loads and loads of data that we can feed our system, and it gets really good at kind of mimicking the way that they respond to issues. But yeah, so sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. Let's use the PSL example. Generally speaking, when you get a response like that, a lot of people, especially when they're busy, they go, "Oh, right, okay, well, I'll phone them in." They say it's coming up in September. Okay, well, I'll phone them in September. But of course they don't, because they write it on the back of a fag packet, shove it in a drawer, and then they're astonished when they see that that business has just made a massive order with a competitor, that writing a note on a bit of paper and shoving it somewhere didn't lead to the outcome that they were that they were looking for. So our approach would be slightly different. Firstly, when someone's talking to you, there's a reason for it. Yeah, I'm not saying that there aren't some people who are polite, but if I send a cold message to someone, they haven't asked to speak to me, and they bother responding to me, there's probably something about the way that I messaged them, or the content of that message, or me, my profile. There's something about that made them think you're worth talking to. So if we think about that kind of journey, we've sent a LinkedIn connection message, perhaps on behalf of the partner. We do it as them, not as us. So, if our partner is Bob has sent a LinkedIn connection message, probably because you have such short kind of connection message notes, probably a kind of a fairly basic kind of value statement. I do X for Y because Z type format. There's not much more than that you can do. But they'd set their stall out with roughly what they're about, and the prospect has gone, okay, I'll accept that message. So firstly, we've already got a bit of a vote of confidence that they've gone, right, this is the sort of recruiter that I will probably need to deal with at some point. So let's get them in the network. That's fine. Then we've sent an outreach message. A lot of the time, the very first one will be deeply candidate led. We've sent them a little story. This is Steve. The reason I think we don't give names, but this is Steve. The reason that we think Steve's quite interesting for you is he grew a recruitment business from a single logo to 48. He's come across every single sort of challenge in terms of managing systems within a recruitment business. He knows exactly what it's like. He's sat in your chair. And the outcome of that was he built a business to a certain size. It had a certain turnover. It had a certain enterprise value when he sold it. And if you want to know about that sort of thing, he's a good guy to talk to. Yeah, plug Steve. But we talk about reasons that person would be interesting to this prospect, not to people in general. Why they would be interesting to you. So they get that response. It's really, really well targeted because there is someone that would be interesting to them. And they go, actually, we're not hiring at the moment, but also we have a PSL, and that PSL is not up until September. The fact that they bothered replying and didn't just ignore it says they're seeing some value in us, and we could now just forget about them, or we could find out a little bit more. So the sorts of questions you might want to ask is, how are you finding the PSL at the moment? When you need help from the agencies on your PSL, do you find that they're pretty good, or you're having some problems? How big is your PSL? Are there lots of agencies on there? You've got quite a lot of autonomy about which ones you work with, or is it a very narrow list? And you work with this agency, and that's the option. We can find out quite a lot. And I mean, I'm not going to try and tell recruiters how to recruit. These are the questions you'd ask on the phone. But just because it's automated outreach doesn't mean to say you shouldn't ask those same sort of questions. So you get a bit of a picture for the PSL. Actually, in reality, is it a fixed document that isn't going to be reviewed until September? Maybe this person can't open it until September, but perhaps someone else can. So build a bit of a picture of the account, understand the opportunities. And this is specifically around a PSL. This can all be done back and forth on LinkedIn messaging, on email, wherever you want to do it. Our step is to kind of build out that account. So we might have gone from this one person who's talked to us to 3 or 4 based on referrals that they give us. And we're going to time some marketing automation. At this point, it might be a little bit less candidate led unless something happens in that account that makes us think that would be a good call. Really good example is, they suddenly put a raft of job ads on their website, because we can do kind of monitoring and be listening for opportunities like that. Or we notice that their job ads are becoming stickier. They're coming down slower than they used to. Or the news announces some massive contract win and they're going to be really busy. So then we might go in candidate led again to try and warm it up. But if they've told us it's a PSL, it is a closed PSL, we're not going to use anyone else before September, what we might be doing is just sort of gentle warming, sending kind of nurture sequence, probably thought leadership type stuff. We should have a conversation sometime about how thought leadership should look as a recruiter versus what a lot of people do. So we might send that sequence over the course of, the 6 months. It might start to get a little bit more frequent as we get closer to the PSL, and you better believe there'll be alerts coming to you. Our system is quite good at nagging, to be honest. Email alerts, we can do, we can do whatever kind of chat tool you use, WhatsApp or whatever. It can bump you in there as well. And it helps the recruiter know, right, okay, hey, listen, we've spent 6 months warming this account. Their PSL's coming up in 6 weeks. I need to be on the phone, not messaging anymore, not sending emails. I need to be on the phone with this list of 6 people and making sure I'm on that PSL come September.
Cool. I think that's a wrap.
Sure. Not
Yeah,
least,
good.
just heard there's some building work going on next door, and I just heard a wheelbarrow going by. Drives me fucking mad, this thing. It's worse than your wasp. I'm actually tempted to give them, I've got 2 wheelbarrows. What a twat. I'm like, I've got a couple of wheelbarrows out the back. I'm tempted to give them one of them, because every time they go, it's just this awful squeak the whole way.
There was a fella walking back and forward in the background there.
Mine?
Yeah.
Right, with a wheelbarrow.
And I didn't notice a wheelbarrow. He's obviously working.